Dave Isaac, Courier Post. Right now on the Sports Bash, Dave, what, 5%, 2%, less?
Less. Absolutely less. If you thought that the Flyers were frustrating before when they were playing terribly a month ago, I've got something for you now. They're playing the best hockey of the season, and if they lose tomorrow and Boston wins, they're eliminated from the playoffs.
Yeah, so realistically,
three straight wins.
Yeah, realistically, even though they've won 3 straight, they really haven't made up any ground, right?
No, they've continued to lose ground because they're so far behind Boston that Boston would have had to lose too, and that just hasn't been happening for them. So, I mean, it's kind of the icing on the cake for what's been a really frustrating season for the Flyers.
What would you say when you look back and say, look, this is the situation they're in? Is there a moment? Is there a game? Is there something that you look back and say that really changed and put them in the position they are right now?
Well, there have been so many different problems throughout the year in terms of what's gone wrong in different games. At points they couldn't score. At points their goaltending was terrible. At points they couldn't defend well. But they've just been inconsistent on the whole for the entire season. And they look like a mentally fragile team at points where once they get down, they can't recover from it. Recently, that hasn't necessarily been the case, these last 3 games certainly, but in terms of the greater part of the season when they should have been making a playoff run, that was the case. And if you're looking for one moment, it was well into when they should have been making that run, but that game up in Boston when Brandon Manning tries to block the shot with the game tied and it ends up going behind Steve Mason instead, that was kind of the big blow that took the wind out of the Flyers' sails when they were they absolutely needed to win that game, and that was just devastating. And as well as they've played recently, it kind of doesn't matter anymore.
Right, and with all that happened last night, Dave, the Flyers could be done tomorrow night, right?
Yeah, if they lose and Boston wins, that would be it. That would eliminate them. So. It's the players talked last night about how kind of difficult of a situation it is. They say that they're kind of having fun with it because they show up to the rink and treat every day like a Game 7. But you can't go 3 weeks of playing exclusively Game 7s, and tomorrow might be the Game 7 that knocks them out.
Dave Isaac with us talking Flyers hockey. Can you confirm this, Dave? Did Dave Hackstall actually smile at the end of his press conference last night?
I cannot confirm that because I was not there for his portion of the press conference. I was in the locker room, but so that would still be news to me. I would plead ignorance to that one. But apparently that was the case. He's a guy who has been a reactionary coach. I think after they lose, he's difficult to talk to than after a win, and that's not always easy either. But I think that even it looked like he did get a little bit of a chuckle out of last night. 2 Gordie Howe hat tricks in one period, something that had never been done for the Flyers before. And of all players who could get the dubious distinction of having the fastest Gordie Howe hat trick in team history, Dale Weise would not have been in my top 10.
Is this the Dale Weise that Ron Hextall thought he was getting, and is he finally showing himself? Because they're under contract with him for more than just this year, right?
Yeah, if they can bottle up the month of March for him, they'll do well for themselves next season. He will do well for himself. I think it's 4 goals, 3 assists in 9 games this month. So he's finally started to come around, and he said that part of that is opportunity, but also kickstarting it off the right way. When he did get an opportunity and he played well in it, that just skyrocketed his confidence to the point where the rest of this month he's really looked like the guy that they thought that they were getting. His career high in goals was 14, came last year, all of them with Montreal before he got traded to Chicago. They thought that he was going to take a next step there, and that really hasn't been the case when you look at his season as a whole. And he was also healthy scratched several times, and I think a lot of people, myself included, questioned Dave Hackstall's roster decisions, and that was probably one of them. There were definitely points in the season where he was making moves that he just felt he needed to get as much offense in the lineup as possible because they weren't scoring goals, and we certainly wasn't helping the cause there. But he's played pretty well defensively for the whole season. But in terms of that offense, there have just been too many times this year where they needed somebody to step up, and nobody was doing it.
Flyers actually make a move this morning that makes some headlines, too. They've got another Union College alum, and this guy's a center, Mike Vecchione. How does that work, Dave, that he can come in and play a few games for the rest of the season? How does that work contractually?
Well, it's an entry-level contract that those entry-level deals are all based off of age, and because he's 24, it's a one-year deal. And there was enough competition for him between the Flyers, the Tampa Bay Lightning, and the New York Rangers that all three of them were willing to say, we will count that first year, that 1 year, as the rest of this season. So all three of them were willing to do that, and then it came to and the money is all the same too. Between the base salary and the signing bonuses, it all adds up to $925,000. So with all those things being equal, it just became about opportunity more than anything else. And Vecchione thought that the Flyers provided a better opportunity going forward for him than anybody else. And that, to me, is a little bit curious if he wants to stay a center, because I think all four of their centers are kind of penned in there. You're not moving Claude Giroux. Valtteri Filppula has come in and done a decent enough job as the second-line center. Once he did come in, that very much opened Sean Couturier up as the third-line center. He's been on an absolute tear since the Flyers acquired Filppula. And you have Pierre-Edouard Bellemare as your fourth-line center. So maybe they move Bellemare to the wing and have Vecchione there, and that wouldn't end up being a lot of money to spend on a fourth-line center. But there was a lot of fanfare for what ends up potentially being a fourth-line center. So we'll see what happens when he actually does get into the lineup. That won't be tomorrow, but it could be as early as the next day at Madison Square Garden. So we'll see what ends up happening there. But that's kind of how that deal ended up getting made.
Dave Isaac with us talking Flyers hockey. And, yeah, Dave, I think the centers in hockey are almost like offensive line in football. Sometimes they feel like they can't get enough. You look at Jordan Wheel, who's a natural center, and he's had his most success slotted into a left wing role. So certainly the Flyers have a history of moving guys around. Now, they lost a forward today as well. Could you tell us what happened with Matt Reed?
Yeah, he blocked a shot last night in the waning minutes of that game, and it sounds like it might be a broken arm for him. 6 to 8 weeks has about that time frame for a broken bone. Of course, in NHL lingo, they only tell you upper body or lower body and not the extent or a specific body part or anything like that. So we're left to guess. But that was the last time he was on the ice, and the puck hit him in the arm. So I think that's a pretty fair guess there. He's a guy that, you know, he was Vecchione at one point. The Flyers signed him as a college free agent out of Bemidji State, and he had 24 goals that next season with the Flyers, and produced at a 20-goal clip for his first 3 seasons, and then kind of trailed off. But he also had his role change a little bit, and he's been a more defensive-minded guy, and he was pretty responsible for the Flyers this year. He ends up with 10 goals to finish the season, which certainly isn't terrific, but on this team, nobody really has been outside of Wayne Simmons, who notched his 30th last night. So I think that they can't be super disappointed with what they got out of Matt Reed this year, but certainly they were hoping for more, and I'm sure he was as well.
And short term, how do they plug that hole?
Nick Cousins looks like he is recovered from a concussion, so I'm sure he'll take that lineup spot tomorrow, and then Sunday, if Vecchione goes in, we'll see what happens then. If it means Chris Van de Velde coming out, if it means Pierre-Edouard Bellemare coming out, and Vecchione going directly into that center slot, or we'll see exactly what happens there. But I would say that Nick Cousins is a safe bet to be in the lineup tomorrow.
Dave Isaac's with us. Dave, real quick, they're not going to make the playoffs. About 99.9% sure on that. Is there a major change or move that you envision or that they should consider in the offseason?
I think you'll see a few changes next year. I think you'll see at least 2 rookie defensemen on this team next year. I think you'll see at least 1 new forward besides Vecchione. I think Oscar Lindblom, the Swedish kid who's over there tearing it up, I think he's got a lot of size. He can shoot the puck. I think you'll see him in the NHL for sure. The goaltending is what really I don't know how to take it. Michael Neuvirth has played in 3 games out of the 16 since he signed a 2-year extension. Steve Mason's got all of the work, basically, and the Flyers have not reached out to him in terms of a contract. I floated this possibility out there in a mailbag piece I did a week or 2 ago. I think that there could be a shot that that contract for Michael Neuwirth was done with the Vegas Golden Knights in mind. How that would go down in terms of a trade or potentially trading him there so that Vegas does not select a certain player. I don't know exactly what that would mean, but based on the usage with Michael Neuwirth, it would not surprise me if that contract was not meant for the Flyers next year. And I don't believe Steve Mason will be back just because he and his agent, neither of them have heard from Ron Hextall. And I think that the longer that goes on, the less likely that they would even want to return. So what happens between the pipes next year, I'm not sure. There's not a huge market for starting goalies, and LA has two of them, so maybe it's Ben Bishop here next year. I don't think they would want to give the keys to one of their young guys who Alex Lyon hasn't played the NHL at all, and Anthony Stolarz only has 4 games of experience. So you're not going to give either of those two guys the keys to a starting job, but that'll be, I think, the most interesting thing, and it wouldn't be the Philadelphia Flyers if you weren't talking about their goaltending situation. So I think that's the biggest thing to look at heading into next year.
Yeah, I was going to say, wow, the Flyers and goalies. The conversation continues. Dave Isaac, everybody, at Dave G. Isaac on Twitter, and, of course, the Flyers tomorrow. What is that, Sunday? It's tomorrow night. They play the Devils.
Tomorrow and they play Sunday. They got to keep winning.
Oh, back-to-backers.
Back-to-back.
Yep. Saturday against the Devils. And, of course, that's a home game there, and Dave will be covering that. And, of course, the Flyers could be eliminated, as Dave said. A Boston win and a Philly loss tomorrow.
That adds up to 4.
And that would be 4. Dave, thanks, pal.
Thanks, guys. Have a good weekend.